Hello everyone, welcome to this webinar in which we are addressing the COVID-19 requirements for reopening business events. This publication was released this week and shared with all AIPC, UFI and ICCA members. It's great to see so many of you have joined us here today. My name is Speet and I'm the COO of ICCA. Before we learn more about how to best prepare for the new normal, I have a few housekeeping notes. This webinar will be recorded and will be made available to all members. You can use the chat function in Zoom to tell others that you have joined, so we all get an idea who is in this meeting. Please share your findings via social media as well. If you have any questions, please post these in the Q&A section and vote for the best questions you wish the panel to address. But we would also like to ask you a few questions in a poll which should appear on your screen now. So the first question is, what's your level of understanding of the topic, getting ready for reopening for business events? Are you an expert? Do you have solid backgrounds? Do you have some basic knowledge, or are you completely green? Please vote now. So we wait for a few answers more. Okay, so you have some basic knowledge. This is good news. We are all in this together and we're all learning here today. So let's move to the next question. Question number 2. We can get that on the screen, please. Is your venue or organization ready for a new normal post-COVID-19? Are you completely ready? No, you're getting there in a few weeks' time. Or no, not yet. We still need to work on this. Let's take a look. See that about 73, 74%, 70% is saying that they are getting ready, but they still need a few more weeks' time. So let's move to the last and final question. So question number 3. On a scale of 1 to 3, how optimistic are you that the global business events industry can overcome this pandemic? Are you extremely confident that we will get all over this? Are you not sure, have your doubts? Or are you not seeing any way out of this crisis? So please vote now. We'll wait for a few more moments to see the numbers coming in. Okay, that looks very positive. So we have 67% of you who are extremely confident that we will get over this. No, that's very good. Let's see if the panelists are as optimistic as you are. It's a real pleasure to introduce you to the 3 CEOs of the truly global organizations in the meetings industry. We have Sven Bossu from AIPC, Senthil Gopinath from ICCA, and Kai Hattendorf from UFI. Welcome to you all. So if we can remove the polls, let's quickly take a look at let's have a chat with Kai first. Kai, welcome. You're the CEO of UFI, the Global Association of the Exhibition Industry, since the end of 2015. Kai, UFI is the Global Association of the Exhibition Industry, representing trade show organizers and exhibition center operators all over the world. How do you think trade show organizers can best prepare for the new normal?
Well, first of all, good evening, good day, good morning to all the members of the joint AIPC, ICCA and UFI community. It's great to connect here today. So how best to prepare for the new normal? By shaping it. We were obviously one of the first industries to be taken down by COVID-19 as it spread from China around the world and became the global pandemic we are now battling. And if we just sit on our chairs and wait and enjoy our home office life, we will be the very last industry to reopen because we are in the evil pot of mass gatherings. So we are putting people at risk by bringing them together, if you listen to the virologists. And there's, of course, something we have to take very serious, because as an industry, we are here to connect people. And so the health and safety of people is our top and utmost concern, jointly all across the MICE industry landscape. So at the same time, when we actively go to the politicians, when we actively go to the policymakers, to the local authorities, to convince them that, first of all, exhibitions, conventions, conferences are not like beer festivals and rock concerts, that we can manage the flow of audiences, that we can help to shape the experience for everyone in a safe and healthy manner, then we are in with a very valid reason to regain our license to operate, and also to put the matters and the activities needed in place to convince them, our customers, the attendees, that we can provide them with a safe marketplace, with a safe meeting place to return to. So how best to prepare for that new normal? Read this document and talk to your local authorities about getting the show floors open again, the marketplaces open again, and then tell our customers, the global communities we are serving, that we're back.
Thank you so much, Kai. We'll get back to you later on when we go through the Q&A. Thanks for sharing. Our next panelist is Sven Bossu, who is the AIPC's recently appointed first CEO. Welcome, Sven. So your organization represents professional convention and exhibition center managers worldwide. We've seen that many venues were completely closed in the past month, or have even served as field hospitals. What advice would you give to our colleagues to prepare for the post-COVID-19 era?
Thank you. There are actually three things they need to do. First of all, come together and listen to each other. It's very important that speak with one voice towards customers and towards authorities on what we're going to do, but also to learn from each other. There's no point of reinventing the wheel. Secondly, we need to convince, and Kai already referred to it, authorities and delegates that we are organized events, not beer festivals, and that the best place to organize events is a venue. We can do it in a safe and secure way. And thirdly, venues do not stand in isolation. We are part of a bigger ecosystem. So venues cannot define their plans in isolation. They need to talk to the destinations, to the hotels, to public transport, to create a holistic view, which is needed to create customer confidence again. But we will be back in force.
So I agree, Sven. We will be back. We will get back to you later on as well in the Q&A. Thanks for sharing that, Sven. So, which brings me to the next panelist, Senthil Gopinath, who is our recently new CEO since last year. Senthil, ICCA is the global community and knowledge hub for the International Association Meetings Industry, representing different sectors from all meetings industry all over the world. In the new normal, what do you think would be the main priority for leaders in the meetings industry?
Thank you, Dennis. I think the most pressing issue that we all realize that we are all in together in this situation. A good example is we keep telling about communicating and collaborating. And today we all three association bringing value and communication and collaboration together to all our members. I think that's fundamental. We all have to work together. From an industry leader's point of view, they all working together on restart and reopening. That's the two segments in the mind, particularly from the association segment and also from the members from the industry as well. But having said that, they're also looking at the next step of, like I mentioned as well, communicating jointly with the governments, the policymakers. How do we open while maintaining health and safety standards? So that has become a priority, and they are all working globally, working together. It's great to see so many of all our members joining together in this webinar. Why do? They want to learn what's a safe health and safety measure. Rather, the word we keep on using, the new normal way of running business events. The other most important factor, I think all the leaders are concerned and they are working toward is how do we build confidence in getting our business events back to our cities and our countries. So that's another key factor they all have been working on. They're looking at various resources to talk, create, and build this confidence among business events. and then of course, particularly on the airline industry as well, so that the airlines come as part of it. They build the confidence among the passengers, fly them into different cities and venues so that we can quickly restart our business events industry. So yeah, so this is what's happening, and I think we all, as I said, we all together, working together, and I'm sure we'll be out of this much faster than we think. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Senthil. Let's hope so. Fingers crossed. I think we've come now to the next panelist, which is Schoen. He's the CEO of the Boardroom at Crisis and has supported AIPC, ICCA, and UFI with the creation of the latest publication addressing COVID-19 requirements for reopening business events. Glenn, I think the attendees are eager to reopen for business events. Could you please take us through the contents of this publication?
Certainly. Thank you very much, Dennis. Sven, Kai, Senthil, thank you very much. It's my privilege to address you now on some of the highlights today of this guidance. And what I'd like to do, as I'm turning on my screen, and hopefully all of you can follow my slideshow here on the screen. Let me first off say thank you very much for having the opportunity to address you. I'm not going to go exhaustively into detail on every little point of the guidance and exactly what follows what, but I do want to stress some of the highlights. And just by means of introduction, I'd like to say we use a number of values as AIPC, as ICCA, and as UFI together as a premise to set this guidance up to develop it. And of course, the focus here is on so-called HSE, or health safety environment requirements around COVID-19. So we tried to really keep a tight focus on what we were going to gather and bring and vet to you. Second, we were really focused on making sure that we have just recent knowledge, not data that's 3 or 4 months old or much preceding this whole crisis that might be useful, but really looking at what has been tested, what has been tried, what is the new knowledge among members that has come into being over the last 2-3 months that has been developed. And particularly we were interested in what's been developed in the last few weeks, this month of May. In terms of the spread and scope for good practice, we tried to be as global as we are. I mean, obviously all three of us were looking at being global organizations, but we also wanted to make sure that's reflected in how and where we gathered the knowledge, and to make sure that we touched on as many bases of expertise and development and innovation in the industry as we could. So we wanted to make sure it's not just going to be an African thing, a European thing, an Asian thing, but truly global in scope. When I say very latest experience, I don't mean just latest knowledge. I mean, we also, as a team, tried to get some of the latest experience, such as that gained in China and in South Korea, with some of the first shows and trade events that have opened up again in Congress centers over the past 2.5 weeks. So we were able to draw in some of that knowledge as well. And in a lot of the details that we gathered, we wanted to make sure that the knowledge we gained is as applicable as possible, as useful, in other words, as possible. So when we look at our joint task force, this task force was originally founded almost 2 years ago. It's expanded since then. It really is joint. We have members from AIPC, ICCA, and UFI in it. We expanded it with a few experts here and there who we asked from outside the industry on particular topics for their expertise and insights. And we made sure that we got a good flow of information, and a lot of people contributed to this. And it's a funny thing to say in a business thing like this, but it's a beautiful process to see from the inside how much these three associations were able to come together to produce this document in so short a time. This whole effort was less than 3 weeks, and the most recent knowledge was literally added less than 4 days ago into this document. Now, the experience may still be thin, but it's something that counted, so we wanted to make sure into this task force and into this expertise were some of the people like Mr. Yang in South Korea at Kintex and Mr. Krupp at the Shanghai SNIEC, who had recent experience with actual events. We also wanted to highlight some differences. There are, of course, different approaches, even in good or best practice. We wanted to make sure that that was covered. We looked at some of the places where they like to test with innovation, where things are tried, sometimes with outside parties, sometimes on their own, but to make sure we're getting some leading edge. As part of that, we looked at some of the high-tech developments, and it's in areas as varied as high-tech cleaning techniques to high-tech registration, so we can do more touchless technology application. I mentioned it, joint. We looked at these things often in a joint manner, but even within the centers where we got the information, it was often joint teams within them. So for instance, when we were Skyping or WebExing with Dubai, we have 7 or 8 people on the line, and everybody from different parts of the business is giving their perspective. So in that sense, this is very useful because it goes above singular pillars or areas of focus to address the holistic aspect. And then, as I mentioned, we added in some extra expertise from the outside. Before I go on, I would be remiss not to say that a couple of people, more than anyone, contributed to these documents and this thing being realized. Those include Rod Cameron of AIPC, Dennis Speet from ICCA, and most certainly also Angela Haverholz and Nick Dugdale-Moore from UFI. So the framework, that's chapter 1, but I want to step back and just mention about the framework that what the basis for this whole document is the framework that was originally developed, promulgated and released on the 5th of May by UFI. The basis framework contained 5 main fields. They're listed on the left there: to ensure personnel and personal safety, enable physical distancing, increasing health and safety measures, implementing crowd control, and encouraging and enforcing these measures. Now, it's important to point this out because the framework itself, of course, had a wide range of organizations contributing to it, from exhibition organizers to venues in different areas to different associations and other experts. And there was also strong endorsement from industry at large. So these were the building blocks that we used to advance on. That's the basis, and then the mission for this guidance was to basically populate the framework as best we could to help you enable implementation. Now, we realize that there will be some among you who sit there and think, you know, we have it pretty much figured out, and we're almost there, and we're looking good. Remember, though, too, that some of the value in what you're reading and seeing here is also validation. It's also benchmark insight. It's also the collective wisdom you're seeing expressed from your fellow peers and your colleagues in industry in different countries and continents. So there's a broad way to look at it. What we did with the framework that we take as the basis for the guidance is we made a few limited adaptations to ensure some areas such as communication, crisis management, food and beverage and banqueting services, transportation and logistics, and third-party suppliers were specifically addressed as well at some level of detail. Looking at the framework, you'll find in that first chapter an emphasis on some thinking around how do we implement this thing. And we had several people contribute some good practice here. I'm just highlighting a few key points, but one clearly was make sure somebody's in charge of it, appoint a leader, and whether you give them an interesting title like Chief Hygiene Officer or Chief Risk Officer, make sure you have somebody who's the focal point and can carry this as a singular effort. Secondarily, think beyond just the health safety people and those who are directly helping them. It's more than just health safety in a health safety environment. It may be supported by people, of course, to begin with. So HR somewhere will need to be involved. Think about IT. Think about regulations you might want to check on so that legal also becomes important. So think about this whole range of people that you might want to be engaging. Several people mentioned the importance of, look, we're here in this sort of chicken and egg situation where we're not quite clear, is the government going to set the requirement, or is the government looking at us at industry and saying, why don't you come up with the requirements and then we'll validate it and we'll say that's okay, we'll set the standard. So there's this little bit of, actually a lot of wiggle room between who's supposed to set it. To the extent, however, that requirements have been set, certainly we're finding that the regulator is seen as the most important and valid party to go to in order to calibrate your own operations and your own measures. We've seen some measures come from industry, some ideas about measures coming from experts, some ideas coming from local government, but the best practice we're hearing is follow the national government standard, and then you're almost by definition generally going to be okay. Engaging others from the United States to Melbourne, Australia, and the exhibition center there, the importance of taking your key stakeholders along on the journey and ensuring that you approach this, look at the next point, as holistically as possible. Think across the chain, think the bigger perspective, and realize that you're not in this alone in one element and you just need to fix one element or one piece of the puzzle. It's everybody needs to collaborate on a larger spectrum, and you have to think about the chain. So as Senthil pointed out from ICCA at the beginning here, it's about building confidence, and in a way it's also about gathering the evidence that you can present to others that you've done your homework, that you're doing your best, that you've thought through the chain, and that you're living up to whatever it is that the requirements are the government is putting down. The final point there is everybody emphasized be flexible, be adaptable. Things are changing, things will change more into the future, and you just have to reckon in this situation, you got to be ready for that. So maintain a flexible mindset. I'm also pointing out that AIPC and UFI, but also ICCA separately, have put out earlier guidance that's directly relevant to what you're doing right now. So please look at these key documents as well. They're linked in there. There's other documents from ICCA that are important to look at in addition. When we think about personnel and personal safety for people, now there's a couple things, sort of the evident thing about whether or not to wear the protective clothing, and that we hand that out safely and we instruct people properly. But some of the key points that came out of the research for this guidance also said, look, risk assessment is going to be your foundation. We'll come back to that in just a second. But key is that you don't just think of this in terms of the venue. You also nowadays have 25 to 35, if not more % of your workforce quite often working from home. They need to be safe as well. They need to be healthy as well. It might be they're doing the accounting, or they're checking on the ticketing, or they're making the brochures and the flyers for marketing, but there's still key personnel to be involved, and you also still have a duty of care responsibility. Second, in looking at risk and thinking about risk, also think about, is it smart maybe to get expertise in there? And one of these sources is insurance companies. It might be the insurance company you're already working with, but a lot of them also have staff for hire for these kinds of processes. And if they've done it to their standard and know your operation, have confidence in what you're doing, it's often also easier to get that policy in place because they have the reassurance from their own people that you've done a good job. A couple of approaches. The Fiera in Barcelona, I talked to Carlos Morena. He and his team, what they worked out at the venue is dividing up into smaller analysis teams to look at risk, looking at all the individual places and different people's journeys and venues and routes into buildings. The Dubai World Trade Center had another very good practice, which was even more structured. They divided all their efforts up in terms of 5 key journeys for customers, organizers, exhibitors, employees, and contractors. And then another key point was, when you think about risk, do keep it up. Realize the risk matrices and models may be changing, and realize that the risks you might have to look for will be changing. We're very glad in this guidance, with the gratitude to the Scottish Event Campus in Glasgow, to be getting a PDF, which we included as a link. It also has a page in the appendices. This was developed by 2 British high-standing consultancies, Fairhurst and Murray Sports and Medicine. And what it does is it looks at the World Health Organization risk matrix for health. It adapted it for events. They have a specialty in sporting events, but it's applicable to almost any. And you can take it as a leading example of what's used internationally now for different categories of events. Physical distancing. All right, well, of course, there are a lot of developments happening in the world around that. Depending on where you are in the world, it's in feet or it's in meters, and somewhere around 1.5 meters to 2 meters seems to be the general standard. Realize, again here too, that all of this advice, think about it in your context, your country, your legislation. It changes and it's different for everybody. In this chapter, we looked a lot at aspects such as barriers, floors and markings, circulation, partitions, seating arrangements, booths for exhibition floors. There's a lot of new developments going on in those areas. And what you have found, or what you will find, is that in a number of these areas, we're also seeing new completely new models of how to do things, how to think things up, but also how to develop things. So it's also led to a few points of caution, or a few things to consider and think about. For instance, when we talk about things like partitions, to remind yourself to make sure that you're buying something that's, for instance, flame or fire retardant, to make sure that you've thought about circulation of people, but you also think about things like door width, so somebody with a wheelchair can get through and your access is not going to have problems. So there's a lot of detailed insights we got from different people that we try to vector into that section. And remember, it's a challenge. You're talking about really changing behavior of people. Now, a lot of the insight we got was also reinforcement, reinforcement, reinforcement. So if you think about the behavior people worldwide are trying to get used to, a key aspect will be that once they've visited 2 or 3 days at your venue, or once they've been to your venue or your event 2 or 3 times, they'll have a general understanding of how it works. But for the time being, at least, we have to put in a lot of effort at helping people out, directing them the right way, showing them the way on how to do it, and reinforcing that. When we think about a few of the select points that were in this chapter, key points made is simply make an actual distancing plan. Don't just go to different rooms and fix things. Don't go to different halls and make that new arrangements. Make sure you get it on paper, you get it on the computer, you make it shareable, you make it visible. Reinforce everything for all the users with signage, and that's from build up to having the event, to how people are supposed to act and move when they break things down. Think about outdoors being indoors. We're seeing now a number of convention centers are thinking about hallways or using exterior walls for things like a new entrance or a one-way walkway. We're also seeing this in the global office space industry. Just a thought about looking at your building a little bit differently, trying to see if there's new ways that you can apply to space that you own or possess or lease for use as part of your larger plan. So don't be constrained just by looking at your floor plan and just by looking indoors. Think all of these things through for all phases of your event. There's a number of teams in different places that have thought about this deeply. Kintex in South Korea, Ahoy in Rotterdam. A lot of good insight on making sure you can show this, you can prove this, and you can help from the setup and the organizer to the actual event and the exhibitor or the show organization to the ones who have to then remove everything. And there's a lot of effort now also going into new technology being developed. Dubai was telling us about these new modules for exhibition booths they were looking at that can be unfolded faster. So you need less time, less people there in the build-up phase in order to get things done. On the exhibition floors themselves, we have a number of interesting points there on involving the exhibitors, looking at what needs to be agreed upon, how do we help one another the best between venues and organizers, and thinking about the writing. We also looked at the concept of dynamic seating for a brief while, where you can think about, if I do have a fixed arena with a fixed number of chairs, I can't readily remove them. Are there different ways to optimize the number of people that can go in there? And among best practice of all places in the theater world, we found now some developing software that's being utilized worldwide. We just used as an example. Now, when we look at health and safety measures, this was one of the, or is one of the largest chapters in the guidance. Within that, we have quite a laundry list of things to touch on, and particularly when we look at that first part of access and screening. And again there, the value of being adaptive. Think as far forward as you can. Can we start the registration process at the attendee or the delegate's home? Can it be on their computer? Can it be on their iPhone? Can it be there with a QR code? So they don't need a paper ticket. They don't need to print anything out at the door. They can swipe, they can touch. There's different ways to do it, but and I'm sorry to use the word touch there, but using touchless technology. If you think about companies like the Info Salon Group or GES developing apps and new services by which we can make people go touchless through this entry and part of the screening process. What people don't want and what causes problems is surprises. So to the extent we can condition people, give them information beforehand, go on our website, go on YouTube, wherever, to inform people, what will this access look like? What are you expecting of me? Where will I be entering? What will happen to me? What will be asked of me? What do I need to present? The more people are comfortable and knowledgeable about what's going to happen, easier that process is going to be. Think about outside or inside, potentially a new actual physical entrance or a new booth setup. Different experiments being done by different companies. We included some of that. Think about different time slots and how technology can support you with telling people, please come between 10 and 11. At the same time, you can also see, and we talked to several venues that are considering more time, simply longer hours for an event, longer hours for a show, and whether it's a trade show or a convention or a congress or an exhibition, if you can extend those hours, you can also spread out the number of people. Go touchless, already mentioned it for a second, a lot of work being done on that. Health checks, to be mindful of what is it that authorities allow, do or don't they allow certain types of checks, certain types of questions, and also to make sure who it is that's supposed to be doing it. Will this be your own personnel? Will this be hired medical professionals? Will this be local authorities? In which case, essentially, a part of the responsibility can be put on their shoulders and some of perhaps the budget for it as well. Security needs to be supported in all this. When you think about access and screening, they have a key role, both as a facilitator, but also in the end as an enforcer. You want to make sure they're in a safe position. They do that politely. They do that in a nice way. They do it in an engaging manner. And if something happens, that's taken care of in a smooth fashion. So they need all those procedures and instructions as well. We included some of that. And then, of course, we may have incidents around screening and access where it turns out somebody should not be allowed in or somebody should be rechecked or retested. So we have some information there we gathered on positive tests and potential, if we need them, isolation rooms. And again, there are some excellent information or some excellent resources. For instance, SingX in Singapore gave us a lot of insight on protocols for cleaning and use around isolation rooms. When you think about all the knowledge that's being developed, it's enormous and it's wonderful to share. But again, don't keep it all to yourself. Also get that client ready. Get the organizer that you have to work with ready. Get the organizations and stakeholders that are all involved in entry access. Everybody who may be coming to your facility. In that sense, it's important to inform them. One of the great good practice guides we got from Michael Krupp over in Shanghai is this background information on the Hunan Auto Show, which was starting on, I believe, the 30th of April, the very first major show in China, again, post-COVID. Hygiene and cleaning in this same chapter, the importance of a hygiene plan. Make sure that you have as many details in there. We put a few examples in there. What you want is that evidence, that proof that builds confidence that you're doing things right, that people know you have a routine, you have specialists, people know exactly what to do to make that cleaning work. A lot of thinking in there about touch points, a lot of developments, things from bathrooms to more general venues. We have put in some information carried about ventilation, new technologies, think about ultraviolet light treatment, mists. You see a picture down below there. the walk-through sanitizer mist from Singapore. You see a picture on the upper left in Brussels at the Expo. They are cutting edge with UVC technology. So a lot of interesting new things being developed and good practices to check on. And then waste has been one issue that a lot of the people we talked to told us to prepare properly for, simply because likely a lot more waste will be generated. And a good bit of that waste, you'll want to make sure, because it was on people's faces or it was on their hands, you want to make sure that that's taken care of in a safe manner and disposed of in a safe manner. The other key 5 that we highlighted in there were communications, crisis management, food, beverage, transport, logistics, and third parties. I will leave it to you to look at the detail. We also looked outside of the industry in some of these areas, and some very, very good cutting edge guidance being developed, including some material available from the WHO. Now, when it comes to crisis management, I just wanted to mention to all the listeners that what we are, of course, doing in large part now is we are all preparing to reopen. We are preparing to serve that market in a safe fashion and to facilitate industry gatherings starting up again and hopefully ramping up in scale and everybody enjoying the work we're doing. Remember, however, that that's in good part now the preventive thing, and that we also have to be ready for the reactive component. The incident we don't want, the news tweet of somebody saying maybe we're not so safe as we say we are in our brochures, the regulator who comes by unexpectedly and finds fault with something that's not clear and that they didn't communicate to you properly. There's all sorts of smaller and bigger incidents that can happen that might cause you to confront a crisis. And we want to make sure you don't have that, and to the extent you have that, that you're prepared for it. So this is one area here, crisis management. Here are some of the best good practice document from ICCA from last fall. We put some links in there, but it's an area to focus on of importance. Implement crowd control. Key points there dealt especially with knowing how people flow through your facility, being able to demonstrate that, to show that, to map that, and whether that's on a screen or whether that's on paper or whether that's on your security cameras or some analysis program. If you can share that, if you can show that to other stakeholders, make clear that you have a good read on that, because if something does happen and you get a slow of the flow and we get people lining up, whether it's outside and they can't get in, or they're moving from the parking to the lineup, or they're trying to get through the last piece of the health screening process, we don't want to have problems. So knowing that we have a problem is key here, and we want to be able to influence that crowd. Now, you all know already from all your years' experience a lot about crowd control. A lot of things that are emphasized in here is simply extra things to consider, and one of the important things here to think about is, what if you have to intervene? It may be that a camera in line 3 at your entry point doesn't work. The thermal camera doesn't work. Battery's dead. And you don't have a replacement. Well, do you then have a plan for getting everybody from line 3 into line 2 and line 1? And who's going to do that? Are you going to send one security officer out without a face mask? Are you going to send 3 health and safety people? Are you going to send a so-called health ambassador on the floor? So these are things to consider if we have a problem with all these people we're trying to manage, this distance we're trying to manage, these rows and lines we're trying to manage, this time sequencing. It's important that we know how it flows, that we can monitor that, and that we can properly regulate it as needed. And nowadays, there's so many good tools out there. We're delighted with all of the insight we got from companies like Crowd Connected and Waitation. Here's an example of some of Waitation's technology, looking at a major event in Nuremberg at the exhibition center in Germany. Why? Because these people not only can give you technology they need, but can also think about the core questions that are important now to a lot of consumers around, for instance, privacy, and can help you show how things can possibly be anonymized. Possibly it can go through Bluetooth, how we measure things. Possibly we could use smart technology on your existing security cameras. Possibly we can give everybody a wristband. There's all sorts of different technologies to do it, and luckily now a growing number of experts to assist in this time of need. Encouraging and enforcing measures, finally. Well, here we're talking a little bit about the carrot and the stick. We want to show what is the good behavior, what is it that people should be doing, what is the yes, what is the positive, but also to make sure that if that doesn't happen, we have the means to, in a polite way, try to make things go the way we want them. So one way is literally on all of these things to display how you're supposed to do it, display to the attendee, the consumer, where are they supposed to go, how are they supposed to do it, what is it you're expecting of them as they are in your venue. Put it on paper as much as possible. Whose role is it to guide that? Should the exhibitor do that? Should some outside contractor who's present keep an eye on his own contractees as they're doing the build-up? But figure out those roles and responsibilities. Make sure that you formalize it. It's an important part of the UFI framework. They emphasized in the beginning, but get it on paper. Whose role is it to do what? Engage government structurally. The government, yes, we know we don't like regulators, we don't like requirements, and it can be tough and it can be difficult, it can be challenging and exhausting and frustrating. Here, though, we have found almost everybody saying, try to keep the government close, engage them as much as possible, make sure you listen really well to what they're saying in terms of regulations and requirements, and make sure that you can show them and you can have the evidence to tell them, yes, you're doing it properly, yes, you're doing it right. Example here from Kintex in Singapore, excuse me, it's Kintex in South Korea, who have regular meetings with local government officials to make sure everything is done right, the reporting is done right, they're showing everything, how it's up to the standard that they're supposed to be meeting, and therefore also enjoy a good, trusted relationship with them. Think about training. That could be remote training, on-the-spot training, but are your people properly prepared to fulfill their role? Are they properly prepared to instruct other people, to assist other people, to direct other people? A lot of that nowadays, fortunately, can be done also virtually. Think about the lessons learned loop as you develop new things. And you find out what helps with encouragement, what helps with enforcing of measures. Make sure your whole workforce knows that, and everybody can contribute to that encouraging and enforcing role as needed. Make sure you're able to answer questions. The initial period, a lot of people we've talked to, including one or two non-industry experts and from other industries, indicate a lot of questions. How do I do this now? Where should I be? What are you expecting? What piece of paper or permit do I need to bring? Do you think my boss wants me to fill out this to prove that I was safe when I did this build at your location? So there's a lot of these kinds of questions. So the more you also think about who can you direct that person to, and sometimes they're very technical, but generally they're more open, but enable your staff to help people with questions. And then to the extent that you're looking on the enforcement side, consider when we're talking about the monitoring of behavior, that there's also such a thing as government apps, government software, government programs that are involved with enforcing rules. And in some cases, you might be able to facilitate or make use of those, such as the case, for instance, at SingX in Singapore, where they use the Safe Singapore system in order to help them with enforcement. Now, in closing, two key points I just wanted to stress. This comes from your industry colleagues. Be adaptable, because things will change. So have that flexibility of mind that you know you're not going to be completely done probably for a while, and keep thinking holistically, so you're thinking across the chain, and you're also thinking about the people you're working with up and down the chain and your other stakeholders around you. We already heard Sven and Kai and Senthil stress that. Here it's the whole ecosystem that needs to be involved to serve industry. Thank you very much for your time and attention. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Glenn. been certainly a learning curve for me as well, going through the publication and helping out. It's been very, very interesting. So thanks for sharing the conclusions here. I would like to encourage also you as audience to ask questions in the Q&A box, which you can find at the bottom of your screen in Zoom. We have the panel back up here to answer a few of those questions. I see here the most popular question, which I would like to ask to Sven. Sven, the question here is, should venues now charge for net usable space instead of real space, since distancing measures are a must now?
It's a very good question. And to be honest, to a certain extent, that's already the case. Now, what we see is two aspects we need to look at. It's indeed net space, and venues will need to be flexible in that. But the second aspect we should not underestimate is time. Remember the buildup of big exhibitions? The way we did them in the past, that's not going to happen anymore. So also the duration of events is going to take longer, similar, because buildup and tear down is going to take longer as well. So what our point of view is that we need to be flexible from our side. Yes, there's going to be a new model, but a new model will depend on the purpose and the nature of the event going forward.
Thank you, Sven. I think one of the questions that was posed is, actually there's quite a few questions about if the good practice guides can be shared with clients and partners and members. Senthil, could you explain a bit more about our philosophy here?
I think it's a good idea to share primarily with clients and partners, because and of course members as well. Mainly it's all about creating awareness and educating them. We discovered through this the guide that it's a primarily we all fundamentally agree that's collaborative effort, holistic approach. So they need to understand what the new process is, what the new methodology being used by all of us as an industry together. So it's yeah, definitely please share it so that there is awareness created, and then it's easy to do business.
Great, thank you. A question for Kai. Kai, I see here the question about face masks. In terms of health and hygiene, what would be your take in requiring face masks for delegates and venue personnel throughout an event?
Well, it's a question that is tied into the social distancing question. It will tie into the density issue. If you have a lower density, they won't be as much needed if people really stay apart from each other. If you pack a place more tightly, it makes a lot of sense. The science is simple on masks, they work and infections go down. So it is an additional safety measure. We had a long discussion actually last night on a Twitter chat over in the US about branding of face masks and sponsoring of face masks and supply of face masks. So everybody foresees that they will be with us for quite a while. And if you actually look at that face masks have become a daily commodity in Asia since SARS. I believe they're here to stay. Yes.
Yeah, I believe so too. Kai, thank you very much. I have a question for Glenn actually about the publication itself. That was coming from Guy Bigwood. He is asking, does the report consider environmental sustainability issues and best practices in making events safe? Could you maybe elaborate a bit more on that?
In a lot of areas, yes. I mean, we did not make it a specific precondition because we realized at this moment it was focused on what's necessary to meet the health requirements. It was also mentioned that, you know, some of the respondents also provided input, clearly outlined the fact that there's a couple of developments we don't know yet what the effect will be. So when we're talking about the use, for instance, of a chemical mist, or all of the cleaning agents that are being used at different venues obviously involve chemicals. What we did have is in a lot of areas people mentioning, please, you know, think about the environment in a general way, think about long term. But in the background, we heard a lot of people thinking about green. So we want to make sure that everything we're doing is also green, and we take that along as a policy point. As a point in case, I could mention Dubai was very specific about that, but so have been other venues. Also the thought about how can we make sustainability and green an added plus by adopting new technologies. So for instance, with touchless, if we don't need
Glenn, I think you're frozen from my side. Let's try it one more time. Yeah, you're back. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Sorry about that. So yes, a number of venues, when they're looking at the types of technologies to adapt, looking at limiting wastage, looking at limiting paper, looking at serious green factors, how we can wrap and package food. It's definitely a factor, but we didn't present it as such in a lot of the recommendations.
Thank you. I think what I read throughout in the questions is also this has a clear impact on the costs. And who's paying for it? Is it the organizer? Is it the venue? Who pays for this? Is this maybe a question, Kai, that I could ask you? Who is paying the bill?
All of us. We're all paying the bill to make our customers feel safe, so they actually pay to attend and pay to book a booth, and we pay us in that way. And now, it is being discussed on the exhibition side of things, obviously between the venues and the exhibit and the organizers, and it's an ongoing conversation. We don't have any guidance from UFI because it is a conversation between various sides of the industry, and they need to come to an agreement. A general consensus that is evolving seems if something is better served by being permanently built in to a venue, it will be an investment from the venue, and then the organizer will pay a service fee. If it is something the organizer can bring, the organizer may just bring it. So organizers can bring face masks, but all the installations to mist people are probably better off if they are permanently installed in the venue. So to give some indication. A quick addition, if I may, on the sustainability issue. I find it quite remarkable that even though we've all been talking COVID for 100 days and more now, the one issue or the two issues that have not fallen off the table at the same time are the long-term sustainability and everything we do, and the issue of diversity. So to me, this is a very, very strong indicator that the way we will rebuild after COVID will very much be driven both by the sustainability conversation ongoing and by a need for wider diversity in everything we do.
Thank you, Kai. Yeah, I think that makes...
If I may just add on to that, Dennis, just one point.
Please.
Just primarily on the who's paying the cost. The association community is also looking at that factor, because it's a more of a contribution on both ends, like I said. So they're also trying to see, considering health and safety of their participants, they want to be part of it as well. So it will definitely a strong mutual clients industry relationship. So I see more and more that's coming forward. And we will we are remodeling our business event segment. So with this, it will be two-end solution. Both parties will support each other. Yeah. Definitely.
Thank you, Sven. What is your view on the cost sharing point of view from the venue side?
I much agree with what Kai is saying. If it's permanent, it will be an investment from the venue. If it's flexible, coming in for one time, it will be an organized side of things. I think that's indeed the way to go. But we also need fully to understand what the purpose is of the event. One of the other questions I can imagine is how we will attract people. Now, we need to think hybrid here. Yes, we will have physical congresses. Yes, people will come physically together. But in addition, there will be a virtual component. So the potential reach of events is going to be far broader than we had in the past. That's also something to take into consideration when redefining the new event or the new normal going forward.
Absolutely, and I'm looking forward to that new model as well, to see how that rolls out everywhere. The fortunate thing is that in many countries, Japan, China, they're reopening already their venues, so we can take a close look at those evolvements. And there's one, I think we can have one more question which I would like to ask to Glenn, which is related to food and safety measures buffets, see managing meals for large gatherings. Could you maybe elaborate a bit more on that?
Yeah, I was just referred to, of course, I was only trying to show some highlights. So within the details of the report, I think in chapter 4, section 4, you'll find some information on food beverage that is also applicable specifically to banqueting. And it's a great question in the sense that please look in the report not just for a particular section as you think you want a topic, but remember that a lot of these are multi-layered measures. So we may be looking for food and beverage and banqueting to hear about that specific situation. However, relevant to food and banqueting will also be good cleaning measures, will also be good distancing measures, will also be good partitions. So a lot of the data that's in this report is applicable to multiple areas or functions or topics, if you will. So just as a general tip, I would like to add that.
Thank you, Glenn. I think there are so many questions and so little time. I would like to wrap up, and thanks for the audience for asking all these questions. We will address I will ask the panel to address these after this session. We are entering a new era, but the good thing is that you can invent today what tomorrow will look like. We have provided you with some guidance, and we hope this will be beneficial to all of you. We welcome your feedback and appreciate it if you would share new ideas with us. Stay safe and hope to see you soon again face to face. Thank you. Bye.